think you're on mute.
Yeah, he's present. He's here, but we can't hear him.
We can keep working on that if you would like to go forward.
Okay. Mr. Schaaf?
Present.
Mrs. Delaney?
Present.
Mr. Chumley?
Present.
And we can all see Mr. Rudy's here.
There you go. All right, please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. We would like to begin tonight's board meeting with recognitions. The West Clermont Board of Education Superintendent Natasha Adams and Treasurer Ellie Sininger would like to recognize the following people for their participation with the 2020 Levy for Learning. Excuse me. Our top leaders and staff parents who held leadership roles for the levy include Jennifer Schaefer, Chairman of the Levy for Learning, Brenda Knorr, Co-Chair of the Levy, Heather Stevenson for Fundraising, Karen Ryle, Treasurer, Everything Bagels, Diane England, for allowing us to meet in her establishment and to host several chats with our community members. The Clermont County Chamber of Commerce, Matt Van Zant, and Bard Nursery, specifically Teresa and Doug Bard, as well as Clint and Kathy Bard. They were very generous to allow us to use the nursery up on 125 to house all of our signs and literature, and allowed it to serve as a kind of a home base for people picking things up and dropping things off to allow for distribution to the literature and stuff throughout the community. So thank you for that. In addition to those top leaders, we also have Derek Parker, Portland Marsh, Jamie Bollinger, Teresa Stone, Eric Daniels, Tiffany Parks, Amanda Karleski, Amy Lane, Shannon Collins, Karen Stafira, Stacy Recker, Roger Taylor, Cheryl Corfagan, Matt White, and Kim Reese. Other staff members and other leaders throughout the district, they did an excellent job making sure our community was well educated on our 5-year forecast and the need for additional revenue. Those staff members and other leaders include Natasha Adams, Superintendent, Kelly Sininger, Treasurer, Mike Overby, Assistant Superintendent, David Foltz, Assistant Superintendent, Ellie Preston, Curriculum Instructor, Lance Perry, Maintenance and Custodian, staff, Lance Perry, Larry Parise, Benjamin Jenkins, Tiffany McLeese, and Jeff Ryle. We'd also like to thank our union leaders, WCEA certified leader, Jennifer Brown, and our HOPE leader for classified staff, DeWilla Whittle. We also had, it's going to take me a few minutes to get through these, sorry. We also had a lot of high school principals, assistant principals, middle school principals, assistant principals, and elementary principals and assistant principals that helped lead the charge, making sure that all of the literature was distributed in the neighborhoods associated with their buildings. We'd like to thank Randy Gephardt, Christy Otten, Jake Colgren, Mike Kirk, Greg Potamon, James Collins, the athletic director at the high school. Middle school, Ross Hudson, Lisa Bender, Don Jacobs, Lucia Cornett, and Tiffany Sawyer, the athletic director at the middle school. Elementary principals and assistant principals, Shane Short, Scott Spicker, Kevin Thacker, Aaron Parker, Cheryl Turner, Josh Young, Lisa Courtney, Megan Lawson, Sue Littman Hall, and Shannon Wee. Lastly, we would like to thank the people and places that hosted chats and coffees or allowed us to use their facilities to host. We'd like to thank Apple Creek Apartment Complex Clubhouse, Beachmont Rolla Arena, specifically Amanda Fields, Clermont County Library Union Township Branch, Caldwell Banker Beachmont, Crossroads, Christy Hogue, Dickey's Barbecue, Thomas and Patrick Harder, Emmanuel United Methodist Church, Graders Ice Cream on Beachmont, Ivy Point Senior Center Apartments, McDonald's and Emilio, the Broughton family, the Combs family, the Tallman family, and the Conrad family. We'd also like to thank the elementary buildings that allowed us to hold chats and coffees with their PTOs, their PTAs, and other families that are registered and enrolled in their buildings. As well as any and all parents, staff, businesses who place signs in their yards or in their businesses and donated any kind of help whatsoever in any way towards the Levy for Learning. The Board of Education thanks you, but above all, our students thank you for working so hard to ensure they are provided a quality education full of opportunities. Thank you. Moving on to, through our agenda, we'll go to the approval of minutes. Mrs. Sininger?
Yes, you have the minutes before you for the regular board meeting held on June 15th, 2020. I respectfully request that you approve the minutes as submitted.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
Moved.
Mr. Rudy, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Chumley, discussion? Hearing none, roll call?
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Abstain.
Motion approved. Moving on to the treasurer's business, Mrs. Sininger.
Yes, item 4.01 is donations, and we would like to bring to you a donation from Everything Bagels. They donated 490 masks to the district, and I respectfully request that you approve those donations of 490 masks.
Thank you. You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schaaf, and a second?
Second.
Mrs. Delaney, discussion? It's just another example of Everything Bagels supporting our district in any way that they can. We thank them very much.
Absolutely.
Anything further? Mrs. Sininger, roll call?
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 4.02 is the financial statements as of May 31st, 2020. For the month of May, the district brought in $4.5 million worth of revenues across all funds. That's primarily the general fund, which was 2.4 million of that 4.5. In addition to the general fund revenues, we did have state and federal grant revenues of 390,000. And our benefit escrow, which is where we accumulate all of the employer share of benefits for our staff, was 1.4 million. Total expenditures for the month were 13.4 million. That was primarily in the general fund. Those expenditures were 7.8 million. We did make our debt payments in the month of May, and those totaled 2.5 million. That was 400,000 for our AE and WT bond payment, as well as 2.1 million for our high school lease revenue payment. We also had $493,000 of expenditures in our federal and state grant. If we look at the next page, which is general fund only, which is what our 5-year forecast is based on, for the month of May, we recorded revenues of $2.5 million. 2.1 of those were from our state foundation payments. When the governor announced cuts and our share of the cuts that would be experienced in the months of May and June totaled 1.7 million. So we started to see that first bit of cuts at the end of May. And then you'll see that in the month of June, our revenues were then cut again. So typically we bring in about $2.6 million of state revenue, and we brought in just $2.1 million. into the general fund for that foundation payment. Our total revenues for the year through May are at 96% of what was budgeted. And last year at this time, we were at 94%. Looking down at the expenditures, as I mentioned before, we've spent $7.8 million for the month of May. And to date, we have spent 89% of the projected expenditures, which is well within budget, and we will end the year less than 100%, and that is because we were able to have reduction in expenditures when we transitioned from on-site learning to remote learning. And then finally on the back page, that breaks down that $7.8 million of expenditures and all of our general fund expenditures to date by function. So far with expenditures as well as outstanding encumbrances to date, we have used 91% of the budget through May 31st, 2020. I respectfully request that you approve the financial statements through May 31st, 2020 as submitted.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Chumley, and who was the second? Mr. Rudy? Okay. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
yes,
Motion approved.
Item 4.03 is the final appropriations for the 2019-20 school year, as well as our end of the year advances and transfers. To date, through June 15th, the board had approved total current year permanent appropriations of $120,943,451. Also, we had carryover appropriations from the prior year of $24.7 million. So our total appropriations that you all had approved to date as of June 15th were $145,649,233. So what I bring before you today are 4 amendments that I am proposing in order to have our final appropriations for the year. So in Fund 010, which is our classroom facilities fund, this is where we account for all of our OFCC construction projects. And as you know from over the years, when part of that project, as each part of the project is approved, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission requires that we encumber all of that, the project costs, regardless of when the funds are going to be received from OFCC. So in order to cover all of our expenditures to date, plus our encumbrances, the proposed addition is $795,300. In Fund 018, at the last meeting, I brought to you an amendment for $90,000 in order to cover the preschool salaries and benefits in that fund. And I need to increase that by $2,500 in order to cover all of those expenditures and outstanding encumbrances. In our High Schools That Work grant, 461, I'm proposing to increase that by $186, and that will allow us to cover those expenditures and encumbrances. And finally, in Fund 599, which is where we account for our Striving Readers grant, I'm proposing an addition of $25,000, and that will allow us to cover all expenditures and outstanding encumbrances. All of those grant additions will all be covered by grant funds that are received by the Ohio Department of Education. So those 4 additions total $822,986, which would put us with final appropriations for the current year of $121,766,437. With the carryover of 2019 encumbrances, we will have total appropriations for the 19-20 school year of $146,472,219. I respectfully request that you approve the final appropriations as submitted. You know what? Also in this same action item, I also have the advances and transfers. So if we could hold off on the vote there, I would appreciate it. So let's go to the 2020 end of the year advances. So at the end of the year, if any of our federal and state grants are sitting in a negative cash position, that's because we've made the expenditure but the Ohio Department of Education has not yet reimbursed us for those expenditures. What we do is we transfer cash from the general fund over to those grant funds to bring the cash balance into the black. And then as soon as we do the reimbursement draw in July and August, and that money is received, we will move it back from the grant funds into the general fund. So those total $3,712, and that is $2,911 to grant 461, $109 to grant 551, and $692 to grant 599. So that's a total advance from the general fund to those three grant funds of $3,712. Finally, we have an end of the year transfer from the general fund to Fund 300, which is our district managed activity. And this is our end of the year athletic transfer. And what this is each year, the extent to which athletic expenditures exceed the pay-to-play fees, then the general fund subsidizes that with a transfer. And again, that's $456,803, and this was accounted for in the 5-year forecast. The 5-year forecast had a projection in there of $457,000. So we are within the 5-year forecast. So with that being said, I respectfully request that you approve the 2019-20 final appropriations, transfers, and advances as submitted.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer, and I'll put that on the floor in the form of a motion and ask for a second.
Second.
Mr. Schaaf, second. Discussion. Mrs. Sininger, roll call.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
and Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved. Item 4.4, the 2020 and 21 permanent appropriation. I forgot to mention about all of this information was discussed with our finance committee last week. And so we had some discussion about it, and all of this has been approved by our finance committee. So I just wanted to mention that before we move on. So for permanent appropriations, you have a PowerPoint as part of this action item, as well as a list of the permanent appropriations. So what I want to bring to you, I will pull up here the actual PowerPoint. Can everybody see that? PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So what I bring before you tonight are total appropriations, current year appropriations for the 2020-21 school year, totaling $121,353,950. These appropriations represent 27 different funds across the district, which are all of our funds. First, the general fund, which is our primary operating fund. And all of the appropriations in this fund are based upon the 5-year forecast that was filed this past May. So during that time, before I filed the forecast, we talked a lot about all of the assumptions, projections that were in that 5-year forecast. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about the individual assumptions in each category, but I will talk about each line item in the general fund, just to remind everyone, these are the types of expenditures that are made from the general fund. We have 15 different funds where we account for our federal, state, and local grant funds. We have 4 funds that are for capital purposes, 3 funds where we account for our student activities and fees, 1 bond retirement fund, our food service fund, a special trust fund, and our benefit agency fund. And just as a reminder, all of these funds are set up in accordance with the Uniform School Accounting System, which is what all school districts across the state of Ohio use. And these appropriations of just over $121 million are within the certificate of available resources that I filed with the county auditor last week. So when you set appropriations, you have to make sure that you have the funds to account to provide for those appropriations, and that's what that fund, that's what that certificate provides for us. So let's look at the breakdown of the $121.4 million. The general fund makes up the majority of our appropriations, or just over 70%. Our grant funds, which I mentioned, we have 15 different grant funds, make up 7.64% of the appropriations. The bond retirement fund is 1.47%. Our capital funds make up 5.28%. Our food service fund is 2.14%. Student activities make up 1.41%. Our benefit escrow account makes up 13.6%, and our special trust fund makes up just 0.02%. I would like to point out that if you were to compare these appropriations to last year, we're very close. Last year, the total appropriations for current year were $120,014,832, and that was when we brought the permanent appropriations to you about this time last year. The major differences are the general fund, like I said, is based on the 5-year forecast. And our bond retirement fund, last year we were paying on 2 different bond issues, and one of those, the 1995 issue, was paid off in December. So now we are only paying for one of those bond issues, which has resulted in a reduction there. Last year, when permanent appropriations were passed, we did not know that we would have the Student Wellness and Success funds being reported in a separate Fund 467. So that was changed during the year, and it's reflected here in the permanent appropriations. And now this year, we do have a new Fund 507, which is where we will account for all of our new CARES funding, the federal funding, which is about $1.1 million. So let's look at that general fund. Again, I won't go into great detail about all the assumptions underlying each category, but our general fund, as I mentioned, makes up the majority of our total appropriations for this district. So our general fund appropriation is $85,461,780. And you can see that 68% of those appropriations are used by salaries and benefits. Our purchase services make up 27.1% of the general fund appropriations. Supplies and materials are 1.6%. Capital outlay is 1.2%. And our other expenditures, which is primarily auditor and treasurer fees and our property and liability insurance, make up 1%. And our transfers out, that's that transfer out to the athletic fund, make up just 0.5%. When you look at total appropriations in the general fund. So those salaries are appropriated at $41.3 million. And I just want to remind everybody that our general fund provides for 90% of our funding for total district salaries. So 90% of total district salaries are paid from the general fund. This includes our salaries for our administrators, our certified staff, which are primarily our teachers, our classified staff, such as custodians, maintenance staff, administrative assistants, and the finance department staff. And finally, our substitutes for our classified positions are all included in salaries. Our benefits are appropriated at $17.4 million. And just like salaries, the general fund picks up 90% of our total district's employer share of benefits. And the primary components of our benefits are health insurance, retirement and Medicare, dental insurance, life insurance, workers' compensation, and unemployment. Our purchase services in the general fund are appropriated at $23.1 million, and that represents 27% of our total general fund appropriations. This is where we pay for our busing contract with Peterman, our tuition to other districts and entities. This is where our open enrollment out is accounted for. This is where our John Peterson scholarships and autism scholarships are accounted for. Our utilities are in here, as well as other professional services such as our certified substitutes, special education contracts that we have, building maintenance, legal services, and instructional and curriculum professional services that we purchase. Supplies and materials are appropriated at $1.4 million in the general fund. The primary components here are transportation supplies, mainly fuel, custodial and operational supplies, some instructional supplies, and then just general supplies across the district. Capital outlay is appropriated in the general fund of $1 million, and this includes primarily our One-to-Wolf program. Those are on the Chromebooks are on a replacement cycle, so they are considered to be capital outlay. We have other technology equipment that is purchased out of our general fund, as well as operations equipment and improvements to our buildings and grounds, such as paving, and let's say panic buttons at each of our schools. Those types of expenditures are included here for safety purposes. And then finally, we have other expenditures in the general fund that are appropriated at just under $900,000. And those other expenditures are primarily county auditor and treasurer fees and insurance. And then that athletics transfer is budgeted this coming year for $426,564. And that would make up 0.5% of the general fund appropriations. So we've taken care of this large piece of the pie, which is our general fund appropriations. So let's take a look at our other types of grant funds, types of appropriations, and kind of break those down a little bit. So our capital fund appropriation, again, that's just over 5% of our total appropriations, or $6.4 million. And what we pay there is our annual high school lease payment. So this year, in the 2020-21 school year, we'll pay $5 million for the annual payment on the high school. The field house that the board approved at the last board meeting is appropriated at $254,000. The Healthplex has an appropriation of $50,000 if new equipment or other purchases are needed there at the Healthplex. And finally, district capital improvements, that's district-wide. There's appropriated $450,000. That's primarily the roof, the middle school roof that you approved at the last board meeting, as well as some other furniture across the district and some smaller capital improvement projects. And county auditor and treasurer fees are included in there too. And finally, here in this category, we have a classroom facilities maintenance fund, which is our Fund 034, which is where we pay for maintenance that's needed to any of our buildings that were an OFCC project. So that's our high school, that's WT, that's Amelia Elementary, and as soon as Summerside and Willowville projects are closed out, they will be included in there as well. Our grant funds, again, if you remember, we have 15 different grant funds that account for about $6.8 million. Federal grants are $5 million of that, and that includes our new CARES funding of $1.1 million. We have $1.8 million of state and local grants. And just as a reminder that these grant funds can only be used for the purpose for which the grant agreement provides for. So we apply for those grants for a specific purpose, and they can only be used for those purposes, not general operating expenditures. Our bond retirement fund is appropriated at $1.8 million this year. And there is just one bond issue that we are paying on, and that was the bond issue that was passed in 2007, and the bonds were issued in 2008. That was for the construction of Amelia and WT Elementary. Those bonds are set to mature on December 1st, 2036, and this year we will pay $1.8 million on those bonds. The food service appropriation is $2.6 million. And the food service fund accounts for everything food service. It's all the salaries and benefits of all of our child nutrition staff, purchase services that child nutrition may enter into contracts for, materials and supplies, as well as equipment. Our student activities and fees funds are appropriated at $1.7 million. That's broken down between our school fees. Our classroom uniform school supplies are at $566,000. Our student managed student activities, which are things like student council, yearbook, science club, DECA, those are appropriated at $200,000. And our student managed, our district managed student activities is appropriated at $950,000. That's things like athletics, band, winter guard, percussion, those types of activities are in those district managed student activities. Our benefits escrow is appropriated at $16.5 million. Again, this is an agency fund, and what it's used for is when we pay our salaries and benefits every 2 weeks, the employer's share of benefits those costs are applied to each of the grants or in general fund, all of the funds in which we have payroll appropriated. And then what happens is the employer share of the benefits go into this holding account, which is known as our benefit escrow account, until the payments are remitted to the individual agencies such as SERS, STRS, workers' comp, or unemployment. And so that accounts for $16.5 million. So what I bring before you today, in the middle column are our current year permanent appropriations of $121,353,950. We will have carryover appropriations, which are all of our outstanding encumbrances, as of June 30th of $6,587,529. For total appropriations for the 2020-21 school year of $127,941,479. I respectfully request that you approve the permanent appropriations as submitted.
You have heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Mrs. Delaney first and seconded by Mr. Rudy. Discussion?
So I just wanted to make clear that typically we do temporary appropriations about this time and then do permanent appropriations around September. And this is just our permanent appropriations that we're going to do now and then not do in September. And then when our new treasurer comes on, if we need to make any adjustments, he'll take care of that through the year. Correct?
Correct, yes. Some school districts right out of the gate will just go right to permanent appropriations. Some districts will do 3 months of appropriations and call it temporary. And then by September 30th, they have to pass their permanent appropriations. So what this does is just set in motion your permanent appropriations. And if Mr. Romano would like to make any changes, he'll just bring those back before you as appropriation amendments.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
And I appreciate this plan, Kelly, because that allows for Mr. Romano to kind of get his feet wet and learn the district and learn the job and not have to worry about that deadline and us missing it and then having consequences as a result. So thank you for thinking ahead.
Yes.
All right.
My pleasure.
Further. Nope. Mrs. Sininger, roll call.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next is item 4.05, and it's the 2020-21 school fees listing. Very similar to last year. I left on the 2019-20 school fee list so that you can compare and see that there is very little change. There are 3 classes that we are not offering this year, and that is cultural studies through literature, men's ensemble, and the advanced aquatics and lifeguard certification. In addition to that, there were 2 classes that were on the list last year as if they were offered, but they weren't offered because after enrollment, our enrollment ended up being lower in that area. And those 2 classes are the novel Cincinnati State and short story studies Cincinnati State. So again, due to low enrollment, those won't be offered again. But otherwise, all school fees, including the athletic fees, the winter guard, and the percussion ensemble are all listed there, and they remain the same as the prior year. I respectfully request that you approve the 2020-21 school fees as submitted.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schaaf, in a second.
Second.
Mr. Chumley. Discussion?
I apologize for that. Mr. Chumley second, and who motioned?
Mr. Schaaf?
Okay, sorry about that.
That's right. No discussion? We can have roll call, please.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
You're muted, Michelle.
You're muted, Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
and Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Motion approved.
For treasurer's comments, I just wanted to let you know that I don't have any update for the 2020-21 budget. We've been watching and hoping that we would have something pretty soon. It's probably likely that the state will wait to see what June revenues look like from income tax, sales tax, all of that kind of information before they decide whether or not the extent to which additional cuts, if any, would be made. So as soon as I hear something, I will pass that information along to you. Thank you.
Superintendent's business. Mrs. Adams.
Hi. Good evening, members of the board, Mrs. Adams, Mrs. Senator. In front of you is the personnel agenda for June 29th, 2020. On the agenda today, we have the resignation of 2 teachers and 1 custodian. The agenda also includes the proposed hiring of 3 teachers, 2 full-time paraprofessional aides, 3 part-time paraprofessional aides, and a reassignment of a teacher into the Dean of Students role at the high school. This agenda also includes proposed approval for supplemental contracts for home tutors and coaches, hiring of substitutes classified employees, such as secretaries and custodial staff, and additional stipends. So at this moment, I'd like to respectfully request that you approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
You've heard the recommendation of Dr. Schultz. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Delaney, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Schaaf. Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Senator?
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Item 5.02 is an overnight field trip request for the West Clermont High School cheerleading squad. They'll be going to Great Wolf Lodge for a UCA cheer camp August 1st through August 4th. Cost of the trip is $400. So I recommend that you approve the field trip as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. I'll put that on the floor in the form of a motion and ask for a second.
Second.
Mrs. Delaney, discussion.
So when I first saw the agenda, I had emailed a question regarding the overnight stay and whether that was going to be a requirement. And I was told that that the actual overnight stay at Great Wolf Lodge would not be required, so that if parents were uneasy of their their children staying somewhere with all the situation going on, that they were not required and that they could commute daily. So I just wanted to pass along that question and answer I had.
Thank you. Anything further? Mrs. Senator, roll call.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Delaney, Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved.
5.03 is the 2021 salary schedule. It reflects administrative salaries, conditions of employment, the non-certified exempt salary schedule and their conditions of employment, and some miscellaneous and non-certified salaries. We bring these to you every year. There are some updates on there in terms of titles and changes. The ranges aren't really any different. We've just moved some names around. So ultimately, this is just all in alignment with what we are practicing. And it doesn't add any new money to our budget. So I'm asking that you approve the 2021 salary schedule and conditions of employment as presented.
For the recommendation of the superintendent, do we have a motion?
So moved.
First by Mr. Chumley, second by Mrs. Delaney. Discussion? Nope. Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf,
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 5.04 is policy approval for the revised 6325 procurement and federal grants funds policy. And so we brought that before you last month, and now we're asking that you make the final approval of this as written to align with the federal guidelines.
For the recommendation of the superintendent, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schaff, in a second.
Second.
Mr. Rudy, discussion? Mrs. Sininger, roll call.
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
yes,
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved.
And item 5.05 is a brief presentation that I'll share with you just to update you on our reentry planning for the 2021 school year. Our administrators have been working really hard this June to get all the details researched and analyzed and put into paper. So we're just very proud of all of their efforts. We first start with our mission, which is commit to excellence with every learner, every day, in every way. And what's vitally important in all of our conversations is that sense of belonging, that being able to come back to school, reconnect, is a huge priority of ours. If you can't connect and feel safe, then you can't get to your learning. And so we know those things go hand in hand. And we want to make sure that students are grounded in what they see possible in their future too. And so we want to connect the learning, sense of belonging, and their future aspirations as we reconvene here in school in the fall. We are driven by our values and our guiding principles. And last month, I kind of showed you a draft version of it. We've made a few tweaks based on administrator feedback. And as we've been going through the surveys from parents and staff and just wanting to be really clear about why we're making the moves we're making. So first, under equip and engage, top priority is student and staff safety and wellness. We need to go ahead and advance to the next slide. Yeah, student and staff safety and wellness is number one, and committing to equity and inclusion, making sure that the decisions that we're making is good and supportive of all students. Fair isn't always equal, but it's important that we keep that at the top of our thinking process. Under grow academic achievement and educational opportunity, our focus is student-centered learning. And that's really about the students learning their social emotional connections that they make with one another, with their teachers, those relationships, and their future readiness. Additionally, one of the tweaks that we made here that was really important to the administrators is providing quality instruction to meet the needs of diverse learners. So we know now more than ever, it's not going to be one size fits all. People are on different pages. They had different kinds of access in the spring, and we can't expect that everyone's going to show up without some gaps and some holes. And so what's going to work for one student may not work for others, and we need to be uber intentional about that. Embrace innovative learning. That's our mindset that we have in all of this planning, that we've got to be continuously learning. We can't put a plan in motion, laminate it, and pass it out and just say, okay, we're good to go for the year. We know that we have to be responsive and continually work with our stakeholders to listen, to learn from our practices and improve. And additionally, we have to look at our practices of what used to be a good practice or something that has served us well that no longer serves our students, that we can kind of put to the side and with something else in place that might be more impactful, more efficient, more effective for our modern learners. And so that's our principle of innovative learning. And finally, and really important, is our optimizing partnerships and aligning resources. We know that we're better together, and that it takes the parents, the students, the staff, the families, the community, everyone coming together to ensure a safe return. And so we are activating our partnerships on a regular basis, connecting with other area school districts, the Clermont County ESC, our partners in other parts of the city, and with our health agencies as we plan. And most importantly, we don't have an endless supply of resources to meet those needs. So we have to take everything into consideration, prioritize, and really maximize our resources. And so it's very important that we stay in line and not go outside of that as possible. We are very thankful that over 5,120 entries were completed on the reentry survey. And again, it's another record of participation on our surveys. And so It's just awesome that when we ask questions, people believe that we're listening and they're willing to share. So that's incredible. I would say that if you click on that summary information, you don't have to do that now, Larry, but it shows all the detail. I'm going to hit some highlights as we go. But what I can assure you is that it was a really fair and balanced, equitable distribution sample from the district. So we really feel like we got a good, strong voice from parents across our community. So starting with those details, we're glad to know that our students are returning. 89.8% of the students in this sample are returning to West Clermont next year. When it came to the question of preferences, we found that the vast majority of people prefer coming back with face-to-face learning, 62%. 7% preferred remote learning, with another 23.3% preferring a hybrid model, which in the question, there was no specificity to hybrid, but there was throughout the survey. So I'll talk about some more details about that in a minute. Overarching though, throughout the survey is that people want to come back. They want to be in school face-to-face, and that came through loud and clear. Of the people in this survey who responded, 96.4% of them have reliable internet. And so we still know there are gaps in our community, and there are some things that Larry and the technology team are working on with hotspots and ways to patch holes where we know they exist in the district. But that number continues to increase. And we know that is a big hurdle that we're beginning to overcome. Something that was interesting, 14.7% of the participants said that if a full-time West Clermont online learning opportunity was made available, would you choose it? And the answer for them was yes. And another 33.3% were unsure. And this is really for those families out there that have some huge reservations about coming back, who want to return to West Clermont, but who, for whatever reason, whether it's social emotional or if it's physical safety, whatever it might be, we have for a large school district, 14.7% is a large number. So we are heavily investing and researching in this possibility of coming back face-to-face, but also offering, based on this feedback, a virtual option that could be a reliable option for them, different than what we did in spring with remote learning. We did ask some questions about transportation just to kind of get a feel, not knowing what the state guidelines are going to be, and knowing we want to maximize our transportation opportunities. 37.3% people said that they could transport their student if it was necessary, and another 23.4% said they could not. And so you can see, and it's not surprising, that the concerns for anything that's not face-to-face, something that might be remote or hybrid, is just the worry of childcare, the concern of transportation, and then lack of technology as a stumbling block. And so that was a theme throughout. What you'll see now is I have the survey question on the left, and then on the right, just kind of an overarching response. So you can get a feel for what really is important to our families. So first of all, most felt that students really had a difficult time adjusting to remote learning. That wasn't an easy transition for them in the spring. Most people do not feel that it's important for us to limit large gatherings. That was not the majority here. Majority do not feel that we should limit class sizes to maintain social distancing. That's not a priority for our parents. And most believe that we don't need to maintain social distancing inside of our classrooms. What they would like to see is frequent sanitation of the classrooms, a clean atmosphere. There was a pretty well balanced response of if there was anything that we should do to limit the amount of times that a student would switch classes or have to be in the hallways throughout the school day. And it was kind of a vanilla response, not strong one way or the other. The majority of people want extracurriculars. That was a strong response and are not interested in us limiting those. They did support us having checks of temperature before students enter the building. They were very opposed to face coverings for students. And as you go on to the next slide, they were opposed to face coverings for staff. They did support the use of hand sanitizer. The fact that students could sanitize their own workspaces and kind of clean up after themselves, just to minimize the work that the custodians have to do to the large areas. The personal space could be taken care of by students a little more often than normal. The majority did support students eating in their classrooms if that was necessary. And the majority of people support a full return to school. The majority opposed remote learning as a possibility. The majority opposed splitting the district. These are two of the hybrid models were listed that we had been considering. And so we just wanted to get a temperature check on them. And one was pre-K 5 would be face-to-face, and then 6-12 would stay remote so that we could spread students out across the district to distance them. And then another thing that was considered is having students attend 2 days each week and complete a third day with remote learning on a 5-day week basis. And so those are, again, two things that we were studying and just wanted to get a quick sense from parents, and they were not really supportive of that, either of those. What we have been doing in June, as I referenced at our last meeting, is that we've been really getting clear about the things that we do know and that we can control and understand, and things that we are unsure of and unclear of. We've built a couple scenarios that runs the gamut of full-fledged 100% everyone back all the way to 100% everybody's remote, and kind of ideas in between. We were looking at patterns and consistencies between those plans so that we could pull out what was going to be true in West Clermont, what were we going to hold on to and promote as our plan, because our work now is to prepare those documents. And we have 2 documents that we plan to share. One would be a playbook for staff, and the other would be a guidance document for our students and our families. So we made a lot of progress in this area over the last couple of weeks. And what I want to share is that I just, right before I got onto the board meeting, I checked my email one last time, and there was an email letting me know that the state plan is not going to be released now until Thursday. And it's probably the 8th different timeline that I've been given for those plans. And so we are moving forward in spite of that, but we really want to make sure that when we get those plans and can shore them up with our plans before releasing the full story to the families. And so what our commitment is with the Clermont County School Districts is that we will all release our plans at the same time. So that'll be a mid-July announcement. One thing that we want to make sure people know that we're doing is that we are investing all of our time and energy into planning a full-time face-to-face return with plenty of safety precautions in place, knowing that there's the possibility of having to remove to remote learning as required. And so we're building in flexibility from the beginning, but that in our minds would not be something that we would choose unless there was an external force that would make that happen. The CARES Act money that Ms. Seninger was talking about earlier, we have dedicated to our Wonderful of Technology. And so that's part of this being prepared for anything movement, is that we weren't very prepared to be able to turn on a dime and go to remote learning across the entire system. And so what we'll be doing is investing in the technology and the support that we need to be able to do that across K-12. Additionally, some of that money will be spent on some advanced equipment and supplies for disinfectant and cleaning, because it clearly in the survey came out very clear. People were concerned about technology. They were concerned about cleaning. We want to invest our dollars in those areas that are top of mind for people. And then finally, Schoology, which is our learning management system. We had gotten some feedback from parents along the way that it was confusing, that different children in their house had different management systems they had to navigate. They thought it would be better if we were under one roof. And so we'll be moving to Schoology for the entire system for the 2021 school year. What I want to put on your radar are these other considerations and kind of what we see as happening as next steps. First of all, as I had mentioned earlier, because of the strong interest in an online full-time option for students, we want to really listen to that and know that we do not want to lose our schools to other programming or other school systems that might be offering that. We want to do everything we can to keep our students with us. And so if that's going to be a need in the fall, and clearly there's some interest there, we are contemplating and exploring starting up a West Clermont K-12 online option for the fall. And this would be one of those things where you would sign up for the fall and you couldn't 1 week decide you would be in online and then the next minute you would show up face-to-face. It would be a commitment that you would make for a quarter or semester. We haven't really narrowed that down yet, but it would be a commitment and a choice and a decision that you're making, and not something that you would teeter in and out of. As needed, we will seek additional staff and family feedback. Right now, we have an additional survey that's out there for teachers and staff to fill out regarding this online option, just to see, do we have anyone in the workforce who has a passion for this, who has interest, and what might that be? So that's the research that we're doing at the moment. This week, as we get the state plans, we will make sure that our plans align, and we will continue to collaborate with all our partners that I've mentioned to you guys before. This needing to start up an online school, as well as make sure that the teachers have everything that they need and the staff has what they need to be fully ready to advance learning for students. We've just hit a wall with looking at the start date that we had been planning all along, that we think it's more disruptive to us keeping it as is. And so we're looking at pushing that back a bit so that we can add in more professional days for staff and just shore up everything here in our brick and mortar environments. And so we will be bringing you guys a calendar to consider, and we'll be sharing that information with the public for some feedback here very soon. We also learned in our research that the Ohio Department of Education is bringing on a new process, and it's called remote learning, becoming a remote learning school district. And so there is paperwork involved with that. It has 6 different components that we would have to complete, and the board would have to pass a resolution on. And one of the things that offers is the ability for us to use our remote learning days as attendance days for our students if we need to use them. And so we want to go ahead and work through that process. And currently the deadline is July 31st for all of that to be taken care of. And so with that being said, they are looking to try to push that and move it. But with that being our reality, it's likely that we will need to call a special meeting in the month of July to take care of some of these housekeeping items to be able to get the designation that we need to do the plan that we want to do. And again, I want to clarify, being called a remote learning school doesn't mean we're going to be in remote learning, that's our first choice. It just allows it if we need to go into that status. We have started our financial analysis and our resource allocation, and that's just an ongoing work that we've been doing. We've been talking to Mrs. Sininger about it, as well as our new treasurer, in terms of what things that we know are part of the plan that can be covered inside of current budget, and then what other options do we need to consider and look for. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we've got these guidance documents that we are creating that will give the staff the playbook that they need and parents the guidance that they need for a safe and successful return to school. Our plan all along has been to communicate with families on the 15th and 30th. So we'll have a little update for them tomorrow that will include this presentation, as well as if we can get, I think there's another piece of information we were going to look for. If we can get that up and ready in time, we will. If not, we'll send it out later. But we just want to commit so that parents know on a predictable schedule when they'll hear from us. So it'll be the 15th and 30th of every summer month. And then we'll get back in our regular schedule here in August. So with all of that, do you guys have any questions or thoughts or things you want us to consider as we continue our planning?
Has there been any indication from the state on anything as far as what their guidance might be, what they might be leaning towards, any kind of transportation restrictions? Have we heard anything?
It's more rumors than anything. I mean, we have seen some, like a draft that came out a while ago, but there's just been lots of rumors of changes since then. So I don't feel like until we see it in black and white, I just feel like it's all been speculation. So we are working to follow what, the science, the health and safety pieces as a first step, and then what's feasible inside of a school setting and what's within our realm of possibility as a second, with our best educated guess, as we also look out the window and see what's happening all around us in the parks and the restaurants and just in everyday life. And so what we are hearing is that the recommendations are going to be recommendations. They're not going to be mandates. And so we want to be able to have a strong rationale for the choices that we're making. And that's what we're working hard to have that rationale built and ready to relay with our plan.
Very good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then item 5.06 are superintendent committees. And I know this week we had a finance meeting. So I don't know if anybody wants to, I know Kelly covered a lot of ground there. Does anybody have anything they would like to add or share at this time?
No, the finance committee meeting was essentially what Mrs. Sininger covered, and I'm not going to say verbatim because I was a little distracted with Little League at the time too, but it was pretty close.
Okay. And then finally, 5.07 superintendent comments. Really, I don't have anything more to add. This presentation really expresses what's on the minds and the hearts of our administrators pretty full time. We have the challenges now of the athletes coming back and moving into other phases of return, and just the anxiety associated with trying to make sure that everyone's following the protocols and that everyone's staying safe and that we are communicating properly and clearly is top of mind for us and our first priority. And we know there's issues cropping up in school districts all around us in this area, just new challenges that we're seeing as our new reality to face. And so we're trying to do everything we can to learn from one another, research, and be prepared. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, moving on to board business. I think we need to recognize that tonight is Mrs. Sininger's last board meeting with us. As she's moving on to greener pastures, we're going to miss you terribly. We thank your support staff for agreeing to cover us through the month of July as you're wrapping things up and taking a little bit of time off and moving on to your new role. So thank you for all that you've done for us over the last couple of years. We are going to miss you terribly and wish you the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chumley, do you have anything?
No, nothing really to add. Everyone stay safe, be smart. Pretty much it.
Okay. Mr. Schaff?
I just want to thank Mrs. Sininger for her time here. I think in the time my time on the board, I think the biggest or the best accomplishments that I can say that I've had was bringing aboard Mrs. Adams and bringing aboard Mrs. Sininger. And I really appreciate both of your efforts, and but focusing on Kelly, since you're the one leaving, really appreciate your the effort that you put in. I don't think the levy would have passed without your coordinated efforts. It's bittersweet. I'm happy for you that you're moving on to a position that will help your family situation better. But I'm sad because it's sad to see you go. But wish you the best, and thank you for all that you've done. And I also want to thank Jennifer Schaefer and her team on the levy committee. As much as Natasha and Kelly did to help pass this would not have passed without all the people that, Tammy, that you had mentioned earlier, and recognized that this would not have passed without them. And I want to thank them. I do appreciate Mrs. Adams, the surveys and seeing the results, and understand that we want to accommodate and move forward with the best wishes of what our parents and district want, understanding though that there's risks and consequences involved for certain actions. So hoping that we take the best interests of everybody to heart, even if it may not be the popular decision. So I definitely would support whatever we decide. So again, thank you, Mrs. Sininger, and thank you everyone with the levy, and that's about all I got tonight.
Mrs. Delaney?
Kelly, this is not goodbye. It's see you later. I'm sure we're gonna all bump heads somewhere because we're all in the same community, and education is a small pool that everybody crosses paths in again. So thank you for everything that you've done for me personally. I could not have gotten up to speed as quickly without your diligence and getting it, to an understandable level. I greatly appreciate that. Thank you to everyone and your efforts for the levy. We could not have done it without our dynamic duo of wonderful women, but the committee and all of the parents and students and teachers and everyone who helped. You guys, you're the reason why it passed, and we all need to cheer for that now. And then thank you, Natasha, and your team for all the diligence that you've gone through to put a plan together. And slow and steady will win the race. And we're just gonna make the right decisions as we have the right information. And like Mr. Schaaf said, everyone gets upset because they don't have the information right now, but we want to make sure we have the right information before we release it. So thank you, everyone.
Hey, Mr. Rudy.
I'd just like to express my gratitude to everyone involved with the levy. It was a wonderful win. I'm glad we were able to pull it off. Mrs. Sinninger, you're going to be sorely missed, but just remember, I'm just on the other side of Bethel during the school year. So I hope to see you and see you at the basketball games with your son. So good luck at Grant. I've already warned people to be good to you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Rudy?
No.
Okay. Over the weekend, I had the opportunity for the first time since February to get out and about in our community. A couple graduation parties took place, and it was great listening to a lot of people that I knew, some even strangers, come up and commend the district on our decision-making in the spring, how we wrapped up the school year. It was really nice. We thought we were doing the right thing. It was very nice to hear a lot of kudos, pats on the back to our superintendent and her team for quickly changing directions. Every time the state would change, the wind would change directions, off would go Mrs. Adams and her cast of characters to make it happen. And I thought that it would be a lot of complaining and a lot of, how that goes, not making everybody happy, but it was a contrary of the opposite. So I wanted to make sure that I passed along the sentiments of those that I was in the presence of. They were very appreciative of our decision making. So thank you for everything that you guys have done to wrap up that school year. I know it was not easy. They also were very appreciative of us getting rolling on the new school year, whatever that looks like, they're supportive of, and very appreciative that we're allowing our fall athletes to start getting together in their training, and just being together makes them feel comfortable that tomorrow is a brighter day and that we are going to get through this together. So getting life back to normal, whatever normal looks like, they're very appreciative of that. I also wanted to pass along those sentiments as well. So thank you for all that you guys have done and continue to do to make us successful and do the right thing for our community. They are very appreciative of your efforts. So thank you.
Well, and I have to say, Tammy, that really is the celebration for me for all of this, is the fact of when people come together around a common purpose, like teachers coming together around the levy with families, with our students, with our administrators. Great things can happen. And that has been proven time and time again. And so that is really the joy and the pleasure of getting to work here is all of us doing this together, because it's not about one person. And we're a team, and that feels really good. So I'm also grateful for everyone who has been a part of, whether it's the levy, of building the strategic plan, pivoting on 1 million remote plans in the spring. It's been an incredible effort, and we're exhausted. We need a break. But it's been something we are very proud of, and will continue to pursue what's best for kids.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I don't have anything further. Do we have any need for executive session? I don't think we do.
Yeah, we do not. We'll just have to get together soon to come up with a possible special board meeting, but we'll make sure there's lots of advance notice of that.
Great. Thank you. All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mr. Schaff in a second.
Second,
Mr. Rudy. I'm not going to ask for discussion. We're going to go straight to roll call.
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Motion approved. Our next board meeting is next Monday, July the 6th. The reason for that, it's right before contracts need to be renewed and final placement of positions and all that. So we need to get that done before the 10th of July. So we're going to have another board meeting next Monday. Again, it'll be remote, same back channel, same time, 7 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Good night.